Welcome back. I'm joined today by Christi Dominguez of the organization V.A.S.T, or Valley Against Sex Trafficking. Christi has her bachelor's in social work and communication studies from Kutztown University, as well as a master's of social work from the University of Pennsylvania. Christi was recently appointed executive director of V.A.S.T. Christi, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
So Christi, tell me a little bit about V.A.S.T and how you guys came together and a brief background of the leaders within your organization.
So 5 years ago, I was not around in the Lehigh Valley, but 5 years ago, two clinical social workers, our organization co-founders, they started seeing this as a possible issue in the Lehigh Valley through their practice and through some of their research. So they became students of what is trafficking, and they realized that it was happening here in the Lehigh Valley, right under their noses. And so they got together a community meeting and a group of people and really just had this very grassroots beginning that we're still trying to preserve today, and just began raising awareness within their own community. And then after that, they realized that they needed to do something. And so it moved into taking action and calling different key people in the community who could put together a response team to identify victims and to start prosecuting cases.
Right.
And that also then led to them to providing aftercare for some of our victims, because there was not the same awareness that there is today. There was not 5 years ago, and so no one knew where to go with the victims. So we have this awareness, action, and aftercare theme that began 5 years ago, and we've carried that strategy on until this very moment, and we're celebrating our 5th year anniversary this year.
Great, okay. So let people know what constitutes sex trafficking and how prevalent is that here in the United States?
Yeah. So, well, trafficking in general, so the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, TVPA for short, it constitutes any type of trafficking as force, fraud, and coercion. So if any of those three elements are taking place, whether it's domestically, whether it's trade for sex, or if it's labor services, that's trafficking. V.A.S.T, we acknowledge that trafficking happens everywhere. All forms of trafficking happen in the Lehigh Valley. I would say that what we see predominantly happening in the Lehigh Valley and what we've been able to find with our FBI partner and law enforcement partners is sex trafficking. And so the reason that this is more prevalent and that we're seeing it is because very often in history, prostitution has just been prostitution. And now with the awareness of sex trafficking, we're understanding that most prostitution, I've seen data from 85 to 95% of prostitution is pimp controlled. So if a pimp is using force, fraud, or coercion to have a woman that he manages sell sex, that is trafficking.
Okay.
So you go back to that force, fraud, and coercion, and you think about where's prostitution happening in the United States? Well, sex trafficking is definitely happening there too.
Okay. You know, when I think of sex crimes like this, I think of the majority of the victims being female, but that's certainly not the case. I mean, we're looking at young teenage boys and even, you know, adolescent boys as well, right?
Yeah, definitely younger men are more vulnerable. The average age of entry into the sex trade, regardless of gender, is 12 or 13 years old. So what we're seeing in the Lehigh Valley we have not had any young males, but that's because often young males are not as easily identified, and also it's just not as prevalent. There's less vulnerability factors. But I would also say that, you know, we get this question a lot, like, well, you know, this is young men too. Yes, it is young men. However, in general, it's not about any gender. It's not a woman's issue or a children's issue or an adult issue. The issue is sexual exploitation and the fact that we're using sex as a trade, and any body, a male or a female body, can be a commodity that can be used over and over and over again, which is why human trafficking is now second and almost ready to exceed drug trafficking.
Okay.
Because the commodity itself can be used over and over.
Okay. So what are the signs of human sex trafficking so that people can recognize it and alert authorities to something like this?
Yeah, so especially as you mentioned, like with younger individuals, so runaway youth, bus stops, malls, these are all places that traffickers that's kind of their preying ground, because they're trying to identify vulnerable youth, vulnerable women, vulnerable people. So some of the signs that are often missed, and there was just a great article from CNN that reported on a young girl that was missed in the ER. So unexplained, when you think of trafficking, you think of domestic violence. So unexplained bruises, unexplained trauma. So if you're in the medical field, like unexplained trauma to sexual organs and sexual areas of the body. Also, seeing someone act differently in the presence of another person, seeing like their attitude change or seeing them not being able to talk as freely are some of the signs, very shallow signs that some people can begin to pay attention to in the community.
Okay. What's next for V.A.S.T? Where is the organization going, and do you have any upcoming events that people that may be interested would want to go to? Yeah,
absolutely. So we have had we've had more than 5 successful prosecutions in the Lehigh Valley of traffickers. So we've kind of got this momentum under our belt, and we want to keep moving, and we really want to focus now on abolishing demand.
Okay.
And while continuing to care for victims and continuing this awesome prosecution team, response team that we have going on in the Lehigh Valley. And so 2 events we have coming up in the future. September 17th, we have Arise. So this is a Partner in the Community Artists Stand Against Sex Trafficking.
Okay.
That's September 17th at Lehigh University. And then in January 11th, we have our first annual gala to raise funds so that we can continue to grow as an organization and we can continue moving on in our strategy.
Great. Thank you, Christi, for joining us. I really appreciate it. After the commercials, we take a visit to a local gun store, Relic Hunter Firearms, to talk politics and guns with the owner, Gerard.